You know what I need? There's a description of the Ramchandra Vijay Mahotsava. I think it's in Madhya 3. I think you could find it. Hold on. I'll tell you where it is. Madhya 15. Madhya 15 starts 31. Today is Ram Vijay Mahotsava, which means today is the day that Ravana was killed. So that's actually, some of that's described in Chaitanya Charitamrita, so we'll read that. Then if there's time, we have another verse to read. Suggested verse. Not the next verse, not the verse after yesterday's verse, but another verse. So we'll explore. Jai Jai Sri Chaitanya Jai Nityananda Jaya Dvaita Chanda Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jai Jai Sri Chaitanya Jai Nityananda Jaya Dvaita Chanda Jai Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jai Jai Sri Chaitanya Jai Nityananda Ye Dvaita Chanda Jai Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jai Jai Sri Chaitanya Jai Nityananda Jai Dvaita Chanda Jai Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Jai Dvaita Chanda Jai. So we are going to begin reading about the description. I don't know if you realize that there's a description of Ravana being killed in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. If you haven't realized it, you realize it now. So we'll read and see what happens. Keep in mind that although Ravana was this huge demon who did so many horrendous things, that we have some of those tendencies also. So it's not like, oh yeah, he's a big demon and I'm like a sadhu. Not exactly. Maybe a little bit, but not necessarily entirely. So this is Madhya Lila chapter 15, text 32. Vijaya Dashami Lanka Vijayera Dine. Vanara Shanya Koila Prabhu Lana Bhakta Gane. One day, celebrating the conquest of Lanka, a day known as Vijaya Dashami, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu dressed up all his devotees as monkey soldiers. Text 33. Displaying the emotions of Hanuman, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu took up a large tree branch and, mounting the walls of the Lanka fort, began to dismantle it. In the ecstasy of Hanuman, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu angrily said, "Where is that rascal Ravana? He has kidnapped the universal mother Sita. Now I shall kill him and all his family." everyone became very much astonished to see the emotional ecstasy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and everyone began to chant, "Joy, joy," again and again. It's Madhya 15, and we're now going to read Shloka 36. Yeah, because the class was scheduled for another verse, which we'll get to after this, because I thought, well, today's the day, so we should read something. We may not get to the other verse, we'll just see how it goes. Text 36. No, I get that's it. That's all that happened. Yeah, that's it. That's all that's described here. Okay. So maybe we can just talk a minute about it. It's interesting because we know when Krishna has fun, everybody has fun, right? When Krishna's pleased, the universe is pleased. Jagat Tushta, the whole universe is pleased when he's pleased. So when we have fun, it doesn't mean everyone else has fun. Sometimes when we have fun, everybody else suffers, right? And so when Ravana had fun, everybody suffered. When Krishna has fun, everyone enjoys. So now, what is the fun that Krishna wants to have? Well, we know the story. So Ravana is just coming to engage in the pastime so Lord Ram can fight, because there's nobody to fight in the spiritual world. Although sometimes it is said that in the spiritual world, Krishna goes to Mathura and kills Kamsa, like not a real Kamsa, but like some kind of Kamsa. That's kind of regular. You know, like sometimes we said, Prabhupada said, there's rumors of demons in the spiritual world. So, here, Krishna went and killed Kamsa. Did it actually happen? Was there a Kamsa? Well, no, but yes. And anyway, so now Krishna gets to fight, and had a great fight with Ravana, and he made it very dramatic. The whole Ramayana is quite dramatic because sometimes it looks like he's losing, right? So why did he do that? Well, you ever hear the stories of Lord Ram and you think, oh no, Ram's losing. Lakshman, he's injured. This is bad. You ever feel like that? Or Sita, this is horrible. Ram has lost Sita. Ravana is going to kill Sita if she doesn't become his wife within a year. You know what he told her? He said, I love you so much that if you don't become my wife, I'll kill you and eat you. Yeah, that's kind of, interesting description of love. So, and we read these things and we think, oh, this is so bad. So what is happening while we're reading these? All this emotion is coming out of us for Sita, for Ram, for Lakshman, for the monkey soldiers. It's all this emotion because that's what it's for. Like otherwise, what's the emotion going to be for? Something mundane. So these pastimes are different because it draws out different emotions. In Krishna Lila, some big demon comes, and you already know within, one page he's finished. Krishna goes, oh, he's dead, Oh, you should die. He's gone. But as soon as Krishna calls for his Sudarshan, okay, it's over. There's not a lot of suspense, and we never really worry about Krishna. But in Ram Lila, you do. And that's how Ram arranged it, that these emotions would come out. And sometimes, look at the story, he banishes Sita, and now we're crying at the end. So instead of crying for the loss of, something, we cry for this separation. Right? So it's good. right? We have to cry for something, right? And then we read Chaitanya Charitamrita and go, don't worry, it's okay. Sita and Ram are eternally together. It's Lakshmi Narayan. Don't worry about it. I go, oh, okay. Then we get transcendental relief. So anyway, so that's the idea. And whenever I read about Ravana, I always think he's such a good example for us because he does everything wrong. I remember maybe it was last year at this time, or maybe it was for the appearance of Lord Ramchandra. I gave some classes and I totally focused on Ravana. He's my favorite character because you learn from people who do things right, but you also learn from people who do things wrong. And he does everything wrong, like typical, right? Everyone says, don't do this. Everybody, all his advisors, and he doesn't listen. Have you ever done that? I'm sure we all did that as kids, right? Your parents say, don't do this. You're like, one of my parents? No. And then you do it, and then you realize that was stupid. But you do it again and again. So that's just one example, right? Isn't it that Ravana set for us? You become attached to doing something that couldn't be more wrong. Your whole kingdom is being destroyed by it. I think we have something going on like that today, don't we? In the world. Yeah, very similar, right? So, sometimes you read Shastra and say, well, this story and how does it relate? And then you look out your window and you go, oh yeah, this sounds familiar. Right? Somebody did something he shouldn't have done, and now he's trying to cover himself and continually does something he shouldn't do and keeps doing something he shouldn't do. Where is it going to end? So, we all have that tendency, for sure. Anyway, there are many bad qualities that he has. But I think we can end there. We can, we feel great bliss. I think for non-devotee, if they came to the temple and we told this story when finally Ravana was killed, we'd all be going, Jai! And they think, these people are weird. They're celebrating a killing. But of course we understand that that's why Ram came. And it's beautiful. What more could you ask for than being killed by Krishna? Like, what are your choices? Airplane crash, car crash, cancer, heart attack, or just old age in general, or Krishna? Of course, you can see Krishna as time, but anyway, Ravana is blessed. All right, so we can read today's verse. If we can find where the book went. You have Prabhu? Yeah, the book that we had, we're going to read now. And another thing we learn from Ravana, similar thing, Chanaka Pandit said, if you give a fool good advice, what happens? He becomes angry. Right? Ravana was very angry to get good advice, wasn't he? Yes. What is it? 3? Madhya 3, verse 212. Is that correct? Yeah, okay. So this verse was suggested for today. Lord Chaitanya at the house of Advaita Acharya. So yesterday we read verse, I think, 96. This is the same chapter. This is verse 212. Before I start, I want to tell you something that I heard 10 minutes ago. It's amazing. And if I don't tell you, I'll forget eternally. So this is recorded on Facebook, so I can watch my Facebook class and remember what I said, because I will forget also. The last time Srila Prabhupada came to London, he was very ill, as you know, and he couldn't stay. He was so sick he had to cancel his trip to America. He was going to go to America after London, and he canceled and he went back. And they gave devotees instructions not to chant the Guru Vashtaka. And the reason was that if we chant that prayer, Prabhupada will get so emotional and he's so sick his body can't handle it. Jai Nishingadin. So I just found that so interesting because it means that there's so many emotions Prabhupada's going through all the time, and thinking of his spiritual master, and thinking of his disciples and their devotion, that we don't always notice and see, but that was the instruction. Isn't that interesting? Wow. Hare Krishna. It was just like Prabhupada. No, Prabhupada must have given it. That's, yeah. I don't think we would give that kind of instruction. We wouldn't know. Maybe we would, I don't know. But that instruction was given, that he can't handle the ecstasy. Nirapeksha hana Prabhu shigra chahila kandite acharya paschat chalila. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was unaffected. He left swiftly, and Advaita followed him weeping. Unaffected by what? I think this was, everyone was leaving. Oh, this is, let's just read a few verses before. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu told them, sometimes you will come to Jagannath Puri, and sometimes I shall come bathe in the Ganges. He's leaving for Puri from Mayapur. Sri Advaita Acharya sent 4 persons, Nityananda, Jagadananda, Damodar, and Mukunda Datta, to accompany the Lord. After pacifying his mother, Sachimata, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu submitted prayers to her lotus feet. When everything was arranged, Lord Chaitanya circumambulated his mother and then started for Jagannath Puri. In the house of Advaita Acharya, there arose tumultuous crying. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was unaffected. He left swiftly, and Advaita Acharya followed him weeping. Purport. Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur explains the word nirapeksha. Nirapeksha means not being affected by anything material and remaining fixed in the service of the Lord. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu did not very much care for the roaring tumult and cry at the house of Advaita Acharya, which he heard when starting for Jagannath Puri. Worldly moralists may criticize Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu for being very cruel, but the Lord did not care for such criticism. As the world teacher of this Krishna consciousness movement, he actually showed that a person seriously engaged in Krishna consciousness should not be affected by worldly affection. The best course is to engage in rendering service to the Lord and to become callous to material objectives. Externally, everyone is attracted to material things. But if one becomes entangled in such things, he cannot make progress in Krishna consciousness. Therefore, those who are engaged in Krishna consciousness should not care for the so-called morality of the material world if that morality opposes the service of the Lord. As Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has personally shown, one cannot properly execute Krishna consciousness without being neutral. This is this is interesting because this is second chapter of Bhagavad Gita. Happiness and distress, don't be disturbed. Success, failure, don't be disturbed. Heat, cold, don't be disturbed. Be neutral. It almost sounds like Buddhism, doesn't it? Like be beyond duality, right? And it's pretty much a basic principle of the Gita. Don't be affected by the results of your work. Tolerate happiness just as you tolerate distress. Be equipoised. And then what does Krishna say? Then you'll be eligible for liberation because you won't be like a yo-yo. And if you're like a yo-yo, then how can you go back to Godhead? Because everything is disturbing you. And so you're knocked around all the time instead of being intentional and intent on your bhakti. We have a t-shirt that says, tolerate happiness. I made that especially so you can walk around, when it's warm, and people hopefully would ask you, why would I want to tolerate happiness? To which you say, because if you don't learn how to tolerate happiness, you will not learn how to tolerate distress. And they'll say, oh, I never thought of that. And so that's in the Bhagavad Gita. And you pull out your Bhagavad Gita. Or you could go with a camera and say, could you tell me what this means, tolerate happiness? Who would have an idea? Why would I want to tolerate happiness? Maybe someone may understand it. And so, what I find so interesting is that it's so clearly explained in the Gita, right? You have a right to act, but you don't have a right to enjoy. You have to stay neutral. Okay, you have done something, here the result, you're the man, you're the woman, you succeeded. You have no right to enjoy the fame. Right? You can't, because then you're caught in duality. You want to hear a funny story? I was in Mayapur, and I have a godbrother who was in Delhi. And for some reason, I don't know why, outside the Delhi gift shop, at the main temple in Delhi, they have a speaker, and they always play My Brahma Samhita, like all the time. That's like the only thing, at least when I was there, that's the only thing I heard them play. And so he came up to me and he said, you're famous in Delhi. I said, why? He said, because they're always playing your Brahma Samhita. And I said to myself, damn, I'm famous, but I can't enjoy it. Because that would be Maya. It's like you give me a plate of maha with everything I can't eat. It's like, why are you putting this in front of me? I can't eat anything. But that's the fact. When you become a devotee and good things come to you, there's an attempt to internally relish what we shouldn't relish because we're not supposed to. We're supposed to not be affected by fame. What to speak when someone comes up to you and say, Prabhu, you did something really stupid. I can't believe an intelligent person like you would do something that incredibly dumb, And you're supposed to just go, okay. Thanks for that information. I appreciate it. Yeah. Right? So, not easy, right? And all those verses, I think we read those verses and we just like, and I go, yeah, that sounds good. It makes me feel good. You ever read those verses and it makes you feel good? Yeah. Beyond duality, happiness. And then, you go out and the next minute, oh, it's cold out here. I don't like cold weather. And you just read the verse, isn't it? They have this funny YouTube video. And, this guy he's always complaining. You ever complain? Yeah. If you just get a counter with you and every time you complain, click it and see how many times a day you complain. Complaining means I'm caught up in duality, right? Otherwise, why would I complain? It's so cold, so much traffic. The prasadam's cold. They ate all the curd out of the sabji. It's like endless, right? Why did they put that garland on the deities? It doesn't match. It's endless, right? So they had this device. Have any of you seen this video? It's a device. And you wear it around your neck, and every time you complain, it shocks you. so you'll stop complaining. And so, they show this guy, and he gets up in the morning, he takes it out of the package, puts it on, there's some coffee there that his wife made. Oh, the coffee's cold. And he goes outside, it's so hot out here. And then he gets in the car, the traffic. And then the funniest thing is, he's going crazy, so he calls up and he says, I want to take it back. And they say, why? He said, this product is driving me crazy. It's like endlessly we complain, isn't it? It's interesting. And then we read these verses and go, oh, look at this verse. And then we give the class, you should be transcendental, don't be affected. But the fact is, we're very affected by duality. And Krishna is saying, if you're affected by duality, you're basically being pulled around, Ragandvesha, by attraction and repulsion. What's that verse? Attraction and repulsion, control. Be mukta is to become free from it. But something like attraction and repulsion, basically you're being pulled, right? Yeah, that's another one. Desire and hatred or attraction and repulsion is the same thing. And we're basically being pulled around. And Krishna's saying, you have to become free from that. Otherwise, our life is just not under our control. It's under the control of our attractions and repulsions, basically. When you think about it, it's interesting, isn't it? So I do a lot of counseling, and people come to me with complaints about their own minds or the minds of others or the situation and like that. And so it's understandable, I'm not unsympathetic, but it's interesting that devotees would have so many complaints because these verses say, don't get affected. We get very affected, right? Sometimes we're affected because preaching is not going well. So yeah, that's good, we should be. But I think devotees don't realize often how much we can be controlled by our own desires and our own aversions. And it's just interesting. I find it interesting. Don't you find it interesting? Since this is kind of seminal to our philosophy, I find it interesting that there are many things seminal to our philosophy that aren't seminal to our lives. It's like, what happened? Why? This is like such a fundamental practice or a fundamental principle of our philosophy, but in real life, sometimes it's like we're almost like the opposite. Have you noticed that? Any of you? So that's a big challenge, right? Getting out of the head and getting it to become something that I am convinced I should live by. So we were listing in the workshop how Krishna loves you, and I came up with he sends somebody to teach you tolerance, humility, and forgiveness. When someone upsets you, do you ever go home and think, oh, let's have a celebration. Krishna has just come to show me mercy because I really need to learn to be more tolerant and forgiving and humble. Usually, no. We go home and we're upset and we're sulking or we're trying to deal with it in some way. Anyway, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur said this very thing. He said, if someone criticizes you, you should think Krishna has sent this person to help you become more humble. So then you just neutralize that immediately, so you're not being controlled by it. Otherwise, you know what happens when you're criticized. Raise your hand if you like to be criticized, because we can start a line right here, and you can just come up and I'll take over and smash you, to smithereens. Yeah. And then he said, when someone praises you, rather than becoming proud, you should think, oh, they're telling me how to become. This is what I should be. They're telling me, yeah, you should act this way. So then, there's no duality, right? There's a story, of course it's fiction, but it's a beautiful story about an angel in conversation with a young boy. And the young boy is told by the angel that in every life that you take, you have an opportunity to learn something. You can learn humility, you can learn tolerance, you can learn forgiveness, you can learn patience. There's so many virtues you could learn. What virtue would you like to learn in this life? And the young boy said, the 6-year-old boy said, I would like to learn forgiveness. And the angel said, okay, so here's the plan. I'm going to come back in another body as your enemy. And the boy was taken aback. And he said, why would an angel come back as my enemy? And the angel said, if you don't have an enemy, how could you possibly learn to forgive? There would be no one to forgive. Interesting, right? So if somebody hurts us, generally we don't think, opportunity. The green lights flash. Ding, ding, opportunity. Now I can learn to forgive. We generally don't think that way. If I respond that way, I'm beyond duality, because I'm not responding according to attraction or aversion. I'm responding according to devotion, what helps my bhakti. Wouldn't that be a better way to live? Where you respond according to the way you should respond, which is the way Krishna and Prabhupada want you to respond, or want us to respond. Wouldn't that be a better way to respond, rather than how I feel in the moment? And we all know how we feel in the moment will change the next moment, or the next hour, right? So it's actually a very deep point. I could probably spend the next 3 days just talking about it. If you really think about it, what it means, it's very essential to our philosophy. Either we're being controlled by the modes of nature, or we're being controlled by the values we're given in Shastra. That's what it really boils down to. We're being controlled by our material attractions and repulsions, or being controlled by the instructions of Guru. Now it's interesting, it's not only interesting, it's many things. Prabhupada is thinking about coming to India, and everybody coming from India to America, and everybody thinks that's a crazy idea. So how were they responding? They weren't responding to the order of Bhaktisiddhanta. They were responding to how they were feeling about it. From their godbrothers to other people to Sumati Maharaji, you're too old, why are you doing this? Godbrothers saying, some godbrothers were saying this, every town and village is not actually what Mahaprabhu meant. It was just like a euphemism, or just kind of, sounds good. They didn't believe it. They didn't think it was possible. So everything is stacked against Prabhupada. They're responding according to their understanding, logical, their understanding of Varnashram, and we're all malechas and we have no right, etc., etc. And Prabhupada's responding to the order of his Guru. And if you see everything that Prabhupada said about that, it was like, I didn't know how it would be, I thought I would fail, etc. We didn't know how it's going to happen. He wasn't acting on any of that. It was like, but here is the order of the Guru. That's what it means to not be moved by your own emotion and caught in duality. You can work through it no matter what. And as I said, the class I gave, or at some point in the workshop or the class I gave, where Prabhupada said, I was always discouraged. And that if anyone has a right to be discouraged, it's me. And then Prabhupada said, but I was never discouraged. So it's like he's saying, I mean, just think about this. I have every right to be discouraged. That's kind of like the natural feeling, reaction to all your godbrothers saying, you will not be successful, don't do it, you'll go there to die, it can't be done, etc. So how would you feel if everyone you knew was saying, don't do it, you'll fail? Then you might start thinking, well, maybe my Guru Maharaj was wrong. Maybe he didn't really understand that this is not possible. And Prabhupada didn't think that way, so that he was not reacting according to how he could have felt, or maybe was feeling to some degree. I mean, Prabhupada saying, my dear Lord Krishna, you're so kind, you brought me to this horrible place. You have some business, you must have some business because you brought me here, but I can't understand how this is going to happen. So, the emotional response is, it's not going to work. It can't work. I don't know how it could work. Look at these people. It's just inconceivable they could take up Krishna consciousness. And we're so fortunate that Prabhupada didn't give in to that. I mean, could you imagine aversion? We are all Westerners, and if we live in Vrindavan long enough, we start becoming averse to Westerners. Like these Westerners, they don't have any culture. You come back to America, and people are walking dogs and like picking up their excrement, and we're like, well, look at this. That's what we did as kids. So even we become adverse to the things we used to do sometimes, isn't it? So could you imagine how much aversion there could have been in Prabhupada's mind and heart coming straight from the Dham to New York, Lower East Side hippies? Hare Krishna. I mean, if you weren't alive then and I just dropped you into Haight-Ashbury in 1967, you'd freak out a bit, even though you're a Western. It's like maybe more degraded than you could imagine. I mean, I was there, so I know. It was crazy. It was crazy. And Prabhupada's in the midst of that. You would be adverse to it. Everywhere, what would you smell? Everywhere you go. You would get high just off the secondhand smoke. And Prabhupada's not giving into it at all. Hare Krishna. So, if in the course I do on self-care, we ask a question. What is the self that you show up as that you hate? It's an interesting question because we all have a self, or maybe more than one, or many. I show up. What does that mean? I acted this way. I go home and I beat my head against a rock. Why did I do that? That was stupid. I hate myself when I act this way. You have that experience? I hate myself when I act. And the action may just be a thought. I hate myself when I think this way, or I hate myself when I say such things. We all have that. Wouldn't it be nice to not have that? To never act in a way that you regret? Why do we act in ways we regret? Because we're being pulled by attraction and repulsion. Isn't it? We're in some way being pulled away from the things that we most value and that we think we believe, which is a whole interesting topic. If I believe that if I go this way, it's the right way, but I go left, then why did I go left if I tell myself, you believe this. Why didn't I go right? Why did I go left? Because you can't say you believe it if you don't do it, can you? I mean, you can theoretically say, no, I believe this is the right thing to do. Well, if you believe it, why didn't you do it? So we want to be at the point where we do what we believe, what we tell ourselves, I believe. So we did an interesting exercise in the forgiveness workshop, and we said, write down everything you believe. So everybody writes it down. Put a line down the page. Next column. If I had a video of your life for the last 6 months, and my job was to write down everything you believe, what do you think I would write down? And match up the columns. Because you can't tell me what you believe. The only way I can understand is I watch your activities. I believe in, taking care of my health. And every day you drink Coca-Cola. No, you don't believe in taking care of your health. You think you do, but you do. I believe in, recycling, but half the time you don't. I believe in, compatible, loving relationships. So why do you yell at your wife like 3 times a day? It's like we don't realize how out of sync we are sometimes. So it's a beautiful exercise. The goal is that your left and your right column are the same. That what you believe you act on. And so people have varying degrees of how much on the right is on the left, and some people have nothing on the right that's on the left. Isn't that interesting? Like, this is what I believe, and then when I actually realize if people were looking at me, they would not find any of these things on the list, or they'd find few. That's the point where we have to make a distinction between what I believe and what I'm doing. Does what I'm doing support what I believe? Ideally, it should. That's the goal, right? But if we're responding impulsively, attraction and repulsion, that's not going to happen. So we want to be able to live according to what we believe. Isn't it? And then you'll never have to say, I hate myself when I do that, because you'll never do it. There will never be a self to hate, because now you're only acting according to your intentions, which are, of course, the values that Krishna gives us. So like I say, maybe we come back and do a seminar on this, because this was just the appetizer. But we should take questions. I have a meeting at 9 o'clock. And we're supposed to end at 9 anyway, right? Yes? Yes? You have a question, comment? Oh yeah, beautiful question. The question is, how can you become callous to the duality without being impersonal? The answer always has to be by doing the positive, by becoming attached to Krishna. That's the ultimate solution for becoming callous to material things. And I'm becoming callous because it's getting in the way of my bhakti. So you're just reinforcing the personal. Or it's getting in the way of my relationship with other devotees. I'm mistreating them or disrespecting them. So negative answers, focusing on negative, it can work temporarily, but there could be side effects. Whereas at least that's the way I always think. I always think, what can I eliminate so that I can get closer to Krishna, or I can have better relationships with devotees? So the negative is just a byproduct of the positive, and the positive is the focus. And the negative that's the pothole in the road. You want to hear something funny? I went to Mauritius in 1983. It was the 3rd poorest country in the world at that time. So there were potholes everywhere on the road. And in America, I grew up in Los Angeles. I never saw a pothole. And so I'm driving, back from a program, and I'm driving through all the potholes. And the devotee starts laughing. He goes, all you foreigners who drive in the potholes, because they all drive around the other side of the road and off the road. And so we have a lot of potholes in our relationship with Krishna. And if we're driving around them, but we're thinking, I have to drive around this because this is getting in the way of my relationship with Krishna, then even driving around is a very positive thing. It's always positive. So, and if I'm callous, because that helps my relationship with Krishna, then yeah, why not? It's good. Yes. Definitely. And if you look to Krishna, he's a lot bigger than you, so it's easy to be humble. But anything that gets in the way of our relationship with Krishna, it's just like, I don't want that. Even though if it serves my ego, but what's the point? I'll die with the big ego and take birth again. Great. Didn't learn the lesson, which I didn't learn in my last life, and the last life, and the last life. Thank you. You wanted to say something?
Difficult to access the personal.
What do you mean by the impersonal realization?
Well, that I'm not this body, for example. Like we're responding with when we speak of duality. Usually, we're responding to how we feel, how we think, and we measure everything relatively.
Yes.
So unless we have this impersonal or an absolute perspective of reality, then we can't enter into the personal element. What it is to have spiritual emotions, spiritual thoughts.
Yeah. I don't know if impersonal is the actual correct word, but it's so interesting. Everything that we have here exists spiritually in its original feature. Relationships, emotions, all these, duality and envy and all of that exist in its perfect form in the spiritual world. And all it does is bring you closer to Krishna. And all it does here is bring you further away. The same thing. Yes?
I have a complaint about your statement about not complaining.
All right.
Okay, so if I wrote it down here. What's the difference between complaining and taking note of an injustice and explaining it to others?
Yeah.
I mean, to say that, there's different natures. So if something's going wrong, we could just kind of, we just accept it as maybe in a saintly way, or maybe just in a dull way. And then there's another nature that, something's going wrong. It's obvious. I want to mention it. But then there's another nature that I want to not only mention it and explain it to others, but I want to correct it. Mm-hmm. And to a certain degree, preaching seems to be complaining about the material world. So these are some observations. And questions.
Well, I can start. I mean, this question it has to be asked because it has to be qualified. Bhaktivinoda Thakur said, if I criticize somebody because that person's actions are affecting others, it's not criticism. That if I criticize that person because his actions are detrimental to him, it's not criticism. And if I criticize him because his actions are detrimental to me, which could be a little subjective, but let's just say objectively they're detrimental to me, that's not criticism. And the problem that I see is not in what you said, it's in the delivery of it. So you see something wrong. Okay, it has to be corrected. Other people are being affected, the temple's being affected, Prabhupada doesn't want this. We've all seen that this can be handled well, or we could make the problem worse by the way we present it. Then we're starting to offend people who've allowed this to go on, etc., etc. You must have seen that a million times, right? So I think that, to me, in my mind, that's the real crucial point. Okay, I see something wrong. Genuinely, I want to help this. I don't dislike this person. But due to my rajas or tamas, when it comes out, I actually make it worse in trying to correct it because I don't have the etiquette and the respect and like that. That's what I see happening a lot. So, and we are, you know how easy it is to become upset when we see things going on in our movement that we know Prabhupada will be upset by, right? We can get really angry. And that anger can turn into Rajagun, Tamagun, and then it comes out and makes things worse. So to me, that's the real, like, how can I do this respectfully? Without, and also I can easily contaminate my heart, because if I dwell on this too much, then I start thinking, how could this devotee do this? Doesn't he know he's offending Prabhupada? And then I go down this rabbit hole. And then now I can't be an agent to help this because I'm too disturbed. And I've just thrown myself into the mode of ignorance. Let me tell you a story, though. It's an interesting story, and I think it's a necessary story. It doesn't answer the question exactly, but it just gives a broad vision of it. In the Gaudiya Math, the head brahmachari stopped chanting his rounds, so they went to Bhaktisiddhanta and complained. And he asked them, is this brahmachari doing seva? And they said, yes. And Bhaktisiddhanta said, that is amazing. Because if I weren't chanting my rounds, I would have no strength to do seva. This devotee has so much bhakti, it's overflowing. He's got a reserve of bhakti, so much so that even though he's not chanting, he's doing seva. Like, he wasn't justifying not chanting 16 rounds, but he was showing etiquette, how to deal with it. So I think that's the important thing. And obviously, when we say don't complain, don't criticize, there are things that if we didn't complain and criticize, we would be guilty, right? Guilty. You say you're guilty of omission. Yeah, the guilty of omission. So I think that is, I spent a lot of time in India. And I heard that Prabhupada said we should all spend time in India to learn the culture. And let me just give you a story. This happened in Dubai, but it was all Indians. I was with Jai Dvaita Swami. We had taken lunch at the home of some business people. And so I think they had a break for 1 or 2 hours, so we went to their home. And when it was time to go, they said, would you like to go now? And Jai Dvaita Swami said, that's the polite way of saying they need to get back to work. But they would never say, we need to get back to work, we have to go now. They would only say, would you like to go now? And we're supposed to be smart enough to know that means they need to go. So that's what I mean. There's an etiquette like that. And we as Westerners are a little crusty around the edges, right? To say it mildly. So at least that's one thing I could say. I think if we are concerned about our movement, we will speak up. But then at the same time, we know you've spoken up endlessly about some things and movement's not ready to hear it. And there's, all you can do is in your own life do it, or wait for another decade when they're ready to hear it. I want to tell one other story because it's such an interesting story, just as a historical reality. I was in Los Angeles, I think it may have been the late 70s or early 80s. And the Grihastas were complaining about something that they felt was artificial, like brahmacharis being artificial. And the Grihastas were like completely right on. But the movement at that time was predominantly brahmacharis, and it was a different mentality. Basic mentality was the Grihastas are in Maya, and whatever they say, it's like whatever, So what the Grihastas were saying, it was just entirely shot down. So about 20 odd years later, when you get the GBC report of what their GBC is doing, and sometimes you get this like flagship statement, this is the new this in ISKCON, right? So it was like, in the mid-90s or something. So what do you think that new flagship statement of the future of the GBC, what we want to do was? The exact thing those Grihastas said 20 years ago. So, you've seen this, we've all seen this. You have this brilliant idea. It's like, this is what all the best organizations do. They're organized this way, they have this culture, they go through these trainings, and you bring that up in ISKCON, and they're like, meh, meh. You're in Maya, this and that. And then 20 years later, you look on the internet and you go, all those trainings, GBC college, they're doing, I said we should do all that 20 years ago, and they practically kicked me out of the temple. Isn't it? Isn't it like that? So my faith is that any good idea will surface at some point in ISKCON because it has to, because it's a good idea and it works, and the bad ideas don't work, and it's just a matter of them not working long enough for someone to go, I don't think this is working. Oh, really? Yeah, I don't think so also. Yeah, I just told you that 40 years ago. But anyway, so sometimes it's like that, and there's nothing you can do because they're not ready. And somebody over in some temple somewhere is really, as they say in Australia, smashing it, and everything's going well, and people start asking, why? And you say, well, we did this training and we implemented this culture and this, and then it starts happening. Sometimes it's like that. Yeah.
I heard on a lecture from Srila Prabhupada how we already have the 26 qualities of a devotee, but they're covered.
Yes.
And then you hear, we're obviously, when we're doing behaviors that are out of alignment with those qualities that we have, somehow then you hear, you have to develop those qualities. So can you just kind of elaborate or explain what?
Well, I think the dilemma is easily solved when you just look at instructions in our scripture that say, control your anger, be tolerant, be humble, and so forth. Don't eat meat. This is a real interesting one. Don't eat meat, right? We take a vow not to eat meat, fish, or eggs. And if you're in China, also insects. So, okay, why do I need to take a vow? Because our philosophy says, if I chant Hare Krishna, then I won't eat meat. That's the Bible. All the good qualities will develop. The problem is, if I'm not careful about my meat eating or illicit sex, intoxication, and gambling, I can't chant purely enough to become detached enough for that to take place. So if I'm angry and intolerant and proud, etc., those anarthas are going to jeopardize my spiritual advancement. And if I jeopardize my spiritual advancement, I don't get to the point where I'm advanced enough that I actually genuinely becoming humble. Fake it till you make it. So the path to humility is to practice it. Like, I don't like this Prabhu, but I'm going to bake a cake for him just because I don't like him, because I need to do that because I'm such a rascal. And then by doing that, I'm advancing. And the next day I chant my rounds. I go, my rounds are so much better today. Wonder why? Yeah, because I carried a grudge against him for 10 years and it finally went away. So I think when we look at all the instructions in Shastra, what we should do, how we should act, it's not like, yeah, you should act this way, but don't worry about it because you'll act this way 20 years from now when you're pure. But if you don't act that way, how are you going to become pure? Because it's an anartha. And then Prabhupada in the CC, in the Gundicha story, is like, clean the temple, pull out the anartha. Like I was saying, the holy name is my Drano because it clears my heart of all the anarthas that clog it up. But I have to, get my hand in there. I put the Drano, but I got to go in and take some stuff out. So my heart's softening by chanting. It's easier to be humble. It's easier to practice it. But if I don't, and I'm not being humble, that's a misunderstanding.
So like in terms of like looking at others, we can, or even ourselves, we can be forgiving because we know deep down they do have the 26 qualities. They're just covered.
Yeah. Prabhu, I have so much respect for you because I can see, although you're acting like a total idiot, mudha, rascal, that deep down inside, I see those 26 qualities are there. Yeah. No, I'm just joking. But sometimes we do think like that, don't we? Yeah. Prabhupada appreciated sincerity. He wasn't evaluating us based on our 26 qualities. He was seeing the sincerity, and that's what he was resonating with. Here's a sincere person they'll do what I ask, they'll follow me, they have faith in me. That's their ticket back to Godhead. Everything will come from that. And so when we say everything will come from that, it also means the realization that I need to improve myself will come from that. And I just won't, because really, if you think about it, well, I'll just chant Hare Krishna, the good qualities will develop. That's a philosophical point, but it's also an excuse for not practicing those now. And sadhana means practice. So if we look at the word sadhana as practice, then I could say, I'm not going to chant because I'm not spontaneous. It's not happening. I don't feel like it. Why should I fake it? No, it's a sadhana. I'm not going to get up. I don't feel like it. It's a sadhana. So all the sadhana is like, do what's right. You know the story. Gargamuni. Srila Prabhupada, I don't feel like bowing down. Bona fide rich Jew from New York, What rich Jew from New York feels like bowing down? Have you met one yet? I can say it because I'm Jewish, And Prabhupada said, bow down and you'll feel like it. So, I think that really answers the question. You should do this because this is proper, even if you don't feel like it. Don't wait till you feel like it, because by doing it, you will humble yourself. Because when you're bowing down on the ground, you feel more humble than when you're standing up with your arms crossed. Right? Even just doing this makes you feel more humble than doing this. And your question about Prabhupada being proud, I just heard a devotee yesterday, I was listening, he said, Prabhupada said, I am proud to be a devotee. And he said, that's why Prabhupada's head was up. Proud. And one time, one man said to Prabhupada, why do you always have your head up? He said, because we can never be defeated. So, that's very proud in the most humble of ways. Why can't we be defeated? Because we take shelter humbly of Krishna. It's interesting, right? So, time to go. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Go Premanandi, Hari Hari Bol.